of our discussion for this session is housing research and private sector organizations. So the focus of our discussion this afternoon is research. And that is the domain of those of us in academics. And you know, in research deals with having to solve problems. The focus of research is problems. And when there is no problem, there is no research. So it is important for there to be a problem first before you think of research. And the problems can be in different dimensions. And these various dimensions we are going to relate to the housing sector. And in research, the problems that can lead to research can be of interest to several individuals and organizations. It can be of interest to the researcher himself. It can be of interest to the research community. To the research community is interested in researches that will fill a gap in knowledge or that will push the frontier of knowledge. And so the research community is interested in those types of research. And then it also can be of interest to the private sector. The private sector is interested in those research that are of commercial use, that can bring in money, that can increase their profit, that can make them to invest more in the sector. And it can also be of interest to government. The 3 tiers of government, it can be of interest to them. And those research that are of interest to the 3 tiers of government are those researches that will lead to policy formulation. So these are the various problems that we shall be discussing this afternoon. And our discussion will focus on 2 main areas. First, we shall be discussing the problem areas in various areas of practice that academic research will help to solve. For that, my colleagues here will take on that. Those areas that academics, those problems they have in the industry or in their own areas that research can help to solve. So we shall listen to them in maybe 7 or 8 minutes. We'll give them a total of 30 minutes. And then after that, we come to the other aspect of developing a research agenda. So I don't have to waste too much of your time. The 4 persons that will lead us, let me say lead us in the first session have been mentioned, have been introduced. And so we shall listen to them to unveil the problem areas that they have seen in their areas of practice that they feel that, well, should deserve the attention of the research community. So we shall listen to them. I'm very sure that they are ready for the discussion. And we start from my left hand, I believe. Okay? Are you okay with that? All right. So we start from my left hand.
Thank you very much, Professor. So we have a short while time. I'll just go straight to the, should I say, the cocoa of the matter. I was on a channels program with Professor Nubi maybe 2-3 years back. And I asked him, or rather, one of the things that was agitating my mind is we keep saying 17 million houses. And 17 million houses has become the accepted figure. It hasn't gone up, it hasn't gone down, it hasn't gone sideways, it hasn't gone whatever. So, but we are still saying 17 million. Now imagine how much you will get paid if you can actually prove that that is actually 20 million or it is 15 million houses, and that these are the type of houses those people require. The point I want to make actually is that I know this is an academic forum, but the point is that there's real money to be made in this type of research. I don't know, maybe in medical field there may not be money to be made, but in academic field, in the field of housing and real estate, there are many people who are ready to pay you for that information. Okay? So that's the first point I want to make. And the second point is that, like I said, there's virtually no research done at all. Why is that? Because the typical ways you can get information, figures, are just not reliable. Let's take, for instance, the land registry. If you are in the US or in the UK, you can get an idea of how house prices have gone up and gone down. You can get an idea of what people are buying from real transactions, because the transactions that are recorded in the lands registry are the real figures, right? But I can assure you that whether it is the way we are designed, the land registry in Lagos, I know probably records less than maybe 20% of the transactions that occur. The director, the permanent secretary, Lands Bureau, usually every year gives a ministerial briefing. And then he will tell you that in Lagos State, 1,423 houses were bought and sold in Lagos State. I mean, that's the figure. And because of the way they charge the fees, people always structure the lawyer might or might not tell you, but they will structure the figure in such a way that is beneficial to them and not to the government. In fact, there was a time Senator Ashafa actually more or less indicated that, look, it is almost acceptable that, well, look, these figures are what we are dealing with, because he made a statement to the effect that what you people are paying for is lower than what is the actual market value. So the first point, there's money. The second point, there's no research. Now, who do you sell this to? Because I believe you want us to talk from a commercial point of view. There's such a wide scale of people that this information can be sold to. Buyers, sellers, financiers, valuation professionals. I was at an event of the Institute of Estate Surveyors yesterday, and they said valuation in Nigeria now is almost like you take it from the sky, because two valuers go to the same place, and there can be a difference of as much as 25% in the values they give. Which means that either both figures are not reliable or one figure is not reliable. And the problem is that, like I said, there's no figure for them to draw. They just extrapolate. Developers, building material sellers, even government, environmentalists, even for someone like me, publishers of magazines. Are developers going to build more houses next year? Are they going to build fewer houses? These are things that we would like to know. What is the advertising spend? These are things that we would be very willing to pay money for. So what do you sell? Like I said, I'm aiming this from what you can make money from. I'm sure others can go into the academic aspect of it. But I think the only reason you want to hear from me, or someone like me, who has only a bachelor's, when all of you probably have triple what I have in terms of academic laurels, is that at least I know how to sell something. So what can you sell? Right? One, very easily, first of all, property values. So how much are houses selling for in Yaba? What kind of houses sold for what? And so on and so forth is what people will easily and readily pay for. All these, the buyers, the sellers, financiers, valuation professionals, and all the people I mentioned, very clearly they want to pay for it. How many new properties came onto the market? In Lekki, in Magodo, in Mikeja GRA, in Yaba, all the places where there are the property hotspots. people who are going to write proposals will pay for that. People who are going to receive the proposals will pay for that. People who want to know about it in terms of going into that business will pay for that. And even, there are even some aspects of research that are so funny. And I'll just leave you with one very funny example and leave my colleagues to say the rest. If you go to the the English property websites of Zoopla or Rightmove, and you search for a property, right? As a Nigerian, you can get here in Nigeria, you can get almost everything you require about that area. The schools in that area, the hospitals in that area, the crime report in that area. Now let me crack some jokes. The Wi-Fi coverage in that area. The newspapers they buy the most in that area. So I was curious, why newspapers? Now apparently, the people who buy The Guardian in the UK, I think maybe they are liberals. The people who buy The Times are conservatives. The people who buy The Sun are a bit of working class. So the number of newspapers they buy in a particular area will tell you the kind of neighbors you will have. I'm saying that kind of research is extreme. And this is not something I pulled from the air. Please go to zoopla.co.uk or rightmove.co.uk. And you'll find that the level of research is required. And people, we don't use that. End users probably won't pay for that. But because they have that kind of information, advertisers will pay to be listed in that kind of site. So my conclusion really is advertising or research, if properly done and commercially circulated, right? You shouldn't look at it strictly from the cost. If you look at it from what you can sell it, then you will find out that it is actually a very good commercial venture. And I look forward to getting more papers from this group in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause. So you did justice within less than 7 minutes. So, and that gives more time for my other colleagues. So, Mr. Davis, I suppose. Okay. Mentioned a number of issues. One is the issue of the actual deficit of housing in Nigeria. That we really have been talking about 17 million housing deficit. 2010, we talk about 17 million housing deficit. 2011, we'll say 17 million. So 2015, we'll say the same thing. And maybe 2020, it remains the same. So, and that is to say that there is no research going on at all. There is no basis for, some of these claims we make. And that is the point he has made. And really, there is the need for research to be done in the aspect of determining the actual deficit in housing in Nigeria. I think these figures we give are just based on, I don't know, is it speculations or what do we call it? See, they are not based on facts. That's the point being made here. And so there is need for, we say they are just assumptions, And so that means we are living on assumptions, and assumptions will not help us. There is the need for us to get accurate and correct data on the housing deficit. So, and that is a problem that can lead to a research. The other aspect he mentioned is about the funding of research. Funding is something that is important. It's what drives research. Without fund, there is nothing like research. Although research is not commercial in nature, but you need some fund to drive it. And so he talks about the funding, how to make fund available for research. And then he also mentioned the fact that there is lack of research because of lack of information or data for research. This is very important. Outside the country, if you want to carry out research in any area, sometimes you find some colleagues, some of our colleagues, they stay in their offices and carry out their research. They send out whatever letter they want to send out, and they get their information through their mail. And they get correct data, correct information. Here in Nigeria, you go to even places, you go to planning authorities, and you can't get data. That's the real problem that confronts research. Then he talks about lack of projection, and then commodities to buy or sell, and what to pay for it in terms of housing this time around, in terms of how many properties are available in the market, and again, boil down to the deficit again. These are some of the issues that Mr. Davis raised in his submission. So thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Now we go to, what's it? Okay, Dr. Shunekon. All right, so Dr. Shunekon, the issue we are facing or we are discussing is still the problem areas in various areas of your practice that will attract academic research.
Well, good afternoon, educationists, and the organizer of this event, the Center for Housing, University of Lagos. I'm going to be talking more on the practical aspect as a developer. I want to be very objective because we are those right in center of this business. We're there to make profit. The truth is said that there are deficiency, and as a private developer, where do we stand in terms of the challenges, and what are the things that confront us, and what you can do in order to bring solvable solutions. A lot of our colleagues are out of business today. A lot of people started and never knew the turbulence of water they're going into. Feel that the real estate sector is a very interesting and money-making venture. I want to tell you that a lot of people today, some can't even show their face. So I had to hide off, and we have abandoned projects everywhere. And I believe it's as a result of what you are supposed to do for us. Many times we have various books. A layman can go into other businesses and pick up journals and pick up materials like dummies in order to help and guide through. But in the real estate sector, we hardly find such. We're looking at land assembly. Let's start from my point of view. I started out 4 years ago. I have over 9 estates now. It's not easy. I have estate in Ghana. I have in South Africa and other states outside, other countries outside Nigeria. And I've been able to understand the trends and events. Knowing that there's so many issues here, from policies, bottlenecks, and just the same thing, lack of data. There's no particular institution that you can go to get accurate data. Starting from land assemblies, where are the lands? The government has told us they have all the lands. And so any land you're even prospecting or you're looking out for belongs to the government. Do they have the data? You help them to provide these data. By the time you come out and you're telling them, there's a place I'm trying to find out, and this and that, and you move in there with meaningful, simple, logical development, road network, infrastructures are put in place, less than few years down the line, you've exposed yourself. They were not there. We were there when you started such projects. Accusation comes in place. So we have a lot of issues starting from assembling of the lands. where do we have this? We're talking of mass housing. We're not talking of, and if you look at the urban areas, the rural areas, we have so much land mass compared to where we have already densely populated, built environment within the urban areas, where you find out that the land, the costs even of land in such environments cannot be accessible. So how do we really make house affordable? Is there really an affordable housing? When the right source, which is land, that's the first ingredient, which is just the basic, is not there. And when it's there, you have to buy. You see, in this country, we will find that for private developers, everything, right from the funding, the projections, the planning, everything is left towards them. Where in other countries, the government are begging and pleading, giving you all that it takes, a right-enabled environment with all infrastructures in place for you to come on board. Here, before you can even enhance the fund, you're talking of hectares of land. And here is the family telling you, before you purchase, you should pay me so amount, the cost of the land. You're not talking of development. You have to rally around, borrow funds. Where is the funds even? A lot of banks say they don't finance land. And then, because of title, you're not even sure. By the time you had to start from ensuring that you have the right title to the land, all this, there's nothing that you do without costs. So from land assembly, the cost of the land, to documentation, then before you even start the project, we're talking about affordable housing, or we're talking about bridging the deficit in the housing sector. How do we start? When you've crossed those hurdles, these are where you should put research for, please. We've seen government projects. For example, the likes of the Agbara project that they have, Ogun State Property Investment Corporation. We've seen the Lagos State LSDPC and all that. But where are those projects today? We want land. How do you get it? Mostly, do you go to the government? When you get there, their price alone, the cost of that land, is not accessible. So you better go to the landowners where you will have to start the process, and it's not also cheap. So cost of the land is something we should look at. The availability of the lands is also another thing. Infrastructure development. Who is in charge? Who is responsible? I have a place in, I remember 3 years ago when I entered that area, Shimawa, 4 years ago down the line. Shimawa was just coming. And less than 1-2 years, when the land opened and all that, we're in process of documentation with the government. 2 years down the line, a publication came. All the land in Shimawa is acquired. As long as we open it, we put road infrastructure, we put the drainage system, we put electrification projects in place, we put most of the mini amenities that would make, which is their responsibility, and they come up and say it belongs to the government. So where do we start? In providing infrastructures, meaningful infrastructures, who is responsible? How do we open virgin lands? How do we make rural areas to become the city? Where they're calling urbanization or urban today, how did they start? Those days, the government, they know their responsibilities. But today, we keep getting involved in what has been done in trying to maintain, we're just trying to maintain the ones that have been done, but are we really expanding? And look at population growth today, concentration in just particular environment. How do we spread? Help us do a lot of research in this. Funding. Hey, when I started, I went to several banks. I talked to them. This is my vision. This is my paper. They ask you to put a lot of, bring your visibility studies, do your business plan, do all those things. And at the end of the day, you have that, and they're asking you, okay, a nice project, bring 30% deposit. And when I have that, and you're looking at a project of what, billions or millions, and you're talking of that, if I have that 30%, I can start. I don't even need you. And that made some of us, we also have become researchers, because we had to try to look at the way out, and that is what we should figure out. If they have failed us, what can be done? The alternatives. And most of us had to reverse back to self-finance projects. Buy expanse of land, divide it into two, sell out on site and service a part, and then you use the funding to start doing development on the other part. They said mortgage system. We looked at what they have in plan. I have a cooperative function, right? Functional cooperative society limited right now. They were collecting money, government were collecting money from NHM contributions, and they told them that you can have opportunity to enhance. How many, with the mass record that we've seen from Federal Mortgage Bank in terms of deposits, and the numbers of people who are in that scheme, have really delivered? I took in my own little notch, 50, 100 people contribute this amount, which you can see. And I have the land. I need the development. Put yourself together. I build, and I give you 5 years, and you are paying. Is that not research? So we say the mortgage system, is it working or not? So there are areas we should really look at, and then try to bring out meaningful suggestions and meaningful solutions. We are ready to imbibe in such practice. We have private PPP, private partnership programs. How many private partnership programs is existing? When the so-called will form their companies and ask them to come up with projects, and then here is maybe a medical doctor handling construction projects. And we have a lot of work to do. Then our conventional construction practice, where we're still using the wet system. You see, research is not just, it's also to the tools, and also to make housing really affordable. Right from our great-grandfathers till date, it's still this wet construction system, cement, water, and whatever. Improving technology. I was surprised in less than few days in SA and also Dubai when I started seeing fabricated buildings. Less than we can't go. How many skyscrapers can we go in this country? And what technology do we have? So I think my time is up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Shunekon. Well, I will just round it up after the last speaker. So we go straight to Mrs. Ajose Rice. Okay, I think she's into PPP, public-private partnership. And she has so many problems in the option of PPP, which she has to tell us. So many problems. And so we are glad to listen to her.
Thank you very much, Professor. My name is Tosin Ajose, as I had mentioned. I feel quite inundated sitting here in the midst of academics, and I just hope that, I'll be able to, add value to what we're trying to do here. From my own perspective as someone that advises in the industry, I think that, first of all, we need to fundamentally understand that there is no market that can thrive without research and data. So you need research and constant data checks and verification for you to develop any market. You need it for policy formulation. You need it for investment assessment. So anyone who's going to be making an investment in Nigeria should be able to access freely data on that market to take a decision on whether an investment decision is viable or not. You also need it for planning. So before we can say that we are deepening the housing market, we can already see that, research and data play a very critical factor in accessing or being able to, push forward the sector. And the second issue would be, why does this need have to be filled by the academics? It's very simple. The academics has a very wide coverage. In Nigeria, I believe that at least every state has one higher institution at the minimum. So that means that you have a pool of people that are able to access data from that particular demographics and provide it to the public. So you have coverage. Another thing is people believe that information that comes from the academics is reliable. So other than depending on maybe the private sector or other people to provide data and information that is based on research, people believe that if it comes from the academics, then it's verifiable and it's reliable. Another thing is, accessing funds for research is much easier from the academics because, again, they believe that they are people that can be dependable and trusted. So you can access grants, subventions, and all of that to back, research and data searches and all of that. Another thing is, you need data, or rather research and data is something that is evolving on a daily basis. So it has to be a set of people that are able to constantly, be out there, be in the market, monitoring what is going on that can provide this service. And the academics, it's their first priority or their first role, seeking knowledge on a daily basis. So there's no other person that I think is best suited to be able to meet this need other than people in the academics. And then in terms of what our needs are in this sector, I think a lot of things have already been said about that. One is we need to be able to identify, the critical elements that make up this our market. So what are the needs of the people in this market? What's the spend pattern of the people in this market? What are their preferences? Every time, someone had said, or rather a couple of people had mentioned across the table that, the data that we have for the deficits we have in the market, has stayed on the same level over a period of 6 years. How can one who's trying to take a value decision on making an investment in Nigeria take that decision if they can't have access to, verifiable information about our market? What are the demographics? How many people do you have in the low income bracket? How many people do you have in the mid income bracket? How many people do you have in the high income bracket? Why is everybody focusing on high end property development? So the market has to be stratified. We need to understand people's needs. We need to understand, market diversification so that we know exactly what, this market needs to thrive. Another thing is you can't have a functional government or you can't have government, driving policies without research. It's not going to work. I have done a lot of work in the regulatory sector, supporting state and federal governments in the housing sector. And I know that a lot of times you sit across the table from people that are feeding them data and information. And even though you don't know what the market position is, is as clear as day that some of these, their values are faulty. And on the back of these faulty values, they are bringing out policies and what have you. And you know that those policies are deemed for failure from day one. So there is no way we would have a functional and effective government system if we do not have support from the academics. So there has to be a way to balance it and give direction to the market. Again, I'll give a typical example of myself. About 2 years ago, I decided that I wanted to write a book or do a publication on construction finance in Africa. And, you know, the first point of call for me was trying to understand the market. And honestly, I could not understand how construction finance works in the Nigerian market because there was no information. What's the percentage of people that self-finance? What's the percentage of people that do joint ventures? What's the percentage of people that are able to access, you know, funds from the banks? What's the percentage of people that are able to leverage, you know, properties that they have to be able to raise financing? All of that is missing, you know. Another perspective is that for you to be able to do risk assessment on any sector of the market, you need to understand, you know, the basic elements that make up the market. So if I'm going to be doing a project, like, you know, I'm a developer and I want to do a project, first of all, I always advise my clients that whatever you're doing, you start from a risk analysis perspective. You know, so you sit down, you want to do a project in, for instance, a Yaba. First of all, you need to understand all the political risks that you are likely to face or that people that have done, you know, similar projects in that environment have faced. And political risk will not necessarily have to do with, you know, maybe government expropriation or whatever. What if, you know, there's a prevalence of say, area boys and whatever, you know, attacking people in the area? For instance, people would typically say that areas like Bariga, you know, and maybe Mushin, they are very, you know, sensitive areas. So if I'm going to do a project in that market, I need to have a pool of funds, you know, that will mitigate these kinds of risk if they do come up. But if I'm a first entrant into the market and I don't have any understanding about how things work, is there a place that I can go and I can find information? One of the reasons why we will never have foreign capital or we will not have sufficient foreign capital coming to this market is because people cannot understand our market and there's no information, there's no guidance. Any information they get is conflicting. So someone comes to Nigeria and wants to invest in a real estate property and he has asked for valuation reports to be done on this property that he wants to buy. And he's gone to the 3 top, you know, real estate valuation companies. And the 3 of them, he cannot even understand the basis and assumptions of their valuation. And the values are so different. And if the margin of error between the values are as much as 35%, I'm not coming to that market. Because it's an indication of what I'm going to come and meet if I come there anyways. And, you know, again, it also dovetails into the issue of funding. I advise a lot on funding, on how to get funding for developments and projects in the market. And what we find is that, you know, the developers themselves, you know, they don't want to, first of all, understand, you know, the market, understand their project and the kind of funding that is best suited for what they are trying to do. And one way to have understanding is if you have access to resources. And resources, you can only have access to resources when people have done research, they have data, and they are providing, you know, write-ups and, you know, a lot of things that people can depend on in terms of guidance. There's the dearth of textbooks and materials in the housing sector today. So you find government is doing a housing finance program and, you know, they have not been able to, you know, first of all, access information that will push them in the right direction in terms of the needs of their population. So they are just copying what they've seen that has been done in Malaysia or has been done in South Africa, and they think that it's going to work in this market. The indices are different, so it's clearly not going to work. Another area that, you know, really, you know, concerns me is for those of us that are in the academics and are even bothering to do any research at all, how practical is it and how efficient is it for me as someone from the business side, depending on that data and information? Can I understand it? Is it in their language? Is it so complex and complicated that I can't even relate to it? Or is it something that I can sit down and, looking at it, like, one of the speakers before me had said, in every other jurisdiction, you find a write-up on any particular area for dummies. So if I want to go into the mortgage sector and I'm looking for something to read on, understanding mortgages for dummies, can I find something that is written from an African perspective, or am I going to just find articles that are written and they are referring to very academic terms and features and I can't even relate to it? And I think this is one of the major issues that a lot of people have with resources that come from the academics. It's hard, for you to understand it from a practical perspective. So we also need to be mindful of how we are meeting the needs of the market. Because they are if someone else who is in the academic reads the article, from their very high IQ, they may be able to relate with it and understand it. But if someone like me, that only has LLB, if I read it, what can I make of it? How does it solve